I can't tell you how many cars have come to me, same deal. They don't run good. They don't start well. They shut off every traffic light. And then you pull the file out of it and you look at it and it's just the Holley base map with the learn feature turned on and the closed loop set to plus minus 100%. You can get that for free if you just knew how to connect the laptop to it. You're getting paid to correct it, but you already watched somebody blow $1,000 or whatever they paid to get to this point, and it doesn't feel good.
Welcome to the HPA Tuned In podcast. I'm Andre, your host, and in this episode, we're joined by Joe Simpson from Tempest Racing and Tune the Trilogy. Joe is well known all over YouTube for his Holley EFI training, and we dive deep into this because the Holley platform is a very popular platform, particularly stateside. It's one that I'm currently getting my head around as well as we start to build up some worked examples for our practical EFI tuning course. So in this episode, a bit selfishly of me, I guess, I'm actually picking Joe's brain to learn what I can and what I need to know about the Holley EFI system, how it works, where its strengths and weaknesses are, and why they have developed the system in the way they've done. We also obviously talk about Joe's background, how he learned to tune, how he got into cars in the first place, and his trajectory. Interestingly now, while he is probably best known for domestic tuning, he actually did cut his teeth on imports, and it's an interesting change of trajectory there. Before we jump into our chat, for those who are new to the Tune In podcast, High Performance Academy is an online training school. We specialize in teaching people how to build performance engines, how to tune EFI, how to construct wiring harnesses. We also cover topics on fabrication, 3D modeling in CAD, race driver education, and data logging, just to name a few. You can find all of our courses at hpacademy.com/courses. All of these courses are delivered in high-definition video modules that you can watch from anywhere in the world, provided you've got an internet connection. This means you can learn from the comfort of your own place and you can learn at your own pace. All of our courses also come with a 60-day, no questions asked, money-back guarantee. So if you purchase them for any reason at all, decide it wasn't quite what you expected, no problem, let us know. We'll give you a full refund. And for podcast listeners, you can also use the coupon code podcast75. That will get you $75 off the purchase of your very first HPA course. We'll put the coupon code in the show notes to make it nice and easy for you to find. Lastly, if you like free stuff, then I've got a great deal for you. We are constantly partnering with some of the biggest names in the aftermarket performance industry to give away some great prizes. You can always find our latest prize at hpacademy.com/giveaway. It might be an aftermarket ECU or dash. It could be some engine components or engine building tools, or just about anything in between. They are great prizes, and we will ship them free of charge to your door if you're the winner. There's no tricks here, no purchase required to get your name into the draw. All right, enough with our introduction. Let's get into our interview now. All right, Joe, thanks for joining us. Welcome to the podcast. And as always, let's start by digging into your background, specifically how you got interested in cars.
So I guess my story isn't overly exciting, but we grew up, I was an only child. I had some brothers and stuff before I was born that aren't around anymore, but we didn't have very much money, and basically probably up until I was 18 or 19 years old, we only had one car, and that particular car was a Pontiac Sunbird, which is possibly the worst car ever made.
This isn't sounding like the beginnings of a car guy story to me.
Yeah, so where I'm going, I think that car probably had 3 oil changes like its whole life, so there was basically none of the, like everybody else's story is usually like me and my dad were out working in the garage every night.
Yeah.
So there was none of that. My dad's brother was a finance manager at a Oarsman. It was a Chevrolet and Mitsubishi dealership. Okay. And we'd go and like just say hi at work. And my dad worked there for a little while, but there would always be like Corvettes on the showroom floor. And then at one point they had like a Mitsubishi 3000 GT.
Oof. Yep.
Which was kind of a flop. But for whatever reason, I could care less about the Corvette, and the 3000 GT interested me or whatever. And I remember sitting in, I don't know how old I was, 8 or 9 or something. And I guess at that moment was when I realized I like the import cars more than the domestic cars.
I'll tell you, with those 3000 GTs, they get a whole lot less interesting if you ever have to do any work inside of the engine bay.
100%.
There is not a lot of real estate free there, not a lot of room for activities.
The 300 ZXs as well. I feel like they're right there on that same level.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, many a 10 mil socket has been lost to those engine bays, I'm sure.
100%. I guess even before that, I was, the typical kid with Ferrari and Lamborghini posters on the wall and that type of stuff.
Right.
A little after that, like my best friend lived a handful of houses down from us. He was about 4 or 5 years older than me, and he started getting into cars well before I was at the age of being able to drive or anything like that. And we had a bunch of, mutual friends. Most of them were like more so his age, and everybody started getting into like Volkswagens at the same time. So I'd say like my first experience with the whole car thing was the earlier, like the Mark III, Mark II Volkswagens. Like if you had a VR6, that was like the rich kids had those, and everyone else had the little like 8 valves that, made 25 horsepower.
It's funny, it's just coming from New Zealand, we didn't really get exposed to that Volkswagen tuning scene at all here. I guess we had no local manufacturing base, so it was just mostly JDM cars. So no exposure. It kind of, I know it's big in the US, obviously in Europe as well, but it's quite unique to me because we just don't see it here.
Oh yeah, that is kind of weird. I'm not too familiar with your side of the world of what's familiar or what's regular and what's not, but yeah, everybody was kind of fooling with those. Obviously, everyone's young, so everything's low budget. And, you put a K&N air filter on, and those things didn't respond to header. So maybe you put like an exhaust on it and custom chips. I think I was 13 years old when I realized that these custom chips were kind of a waste of money.
Right.
A buddy of mine spent, however many weeks saving up money so he could buy this like new computer chip. And I rode with him to the place, and they put it in, and then we rode home together. I'm like, did they forget to do it? Like nothing changed.
And clearly this isn't a case of we'll put it on the dyno and figure out where it's at, get a baseline, make some changes. Oh, here's your custom chip to suit, and here's the gains that you've got. This is just a off the shelf fit and forget.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't even remember if they told you what they changed. I think it was just like, buy this, chip for your, and it probably gave some big horsepower claim or whatever, but
of course,
like best case scenario, it probably raised the rev limiter a little bit. And yeah, so that was kind of the intro to that. What was sort of interesting is there was a place from us, well, actually the place that did that chip install for him. So this is maybe 4 or 5 years later. I had become a customer of theirs because I eventually got a car, and I got a phone call out of the blue from them when I was a senior in high school, asking if I wanted a job, which to this day, I still don't know how or why they called me out of their, 50 million customers that they have. And keep in mind, at this point, I don't know how to work on a car, or, maybe I could do an oil change at best. But the position was, I think it was presented as like shipping department type stuff.
Okay.
But the reality of it is I went there and I ran errands and went and picked up lunch, and, occasionally I'd ship a box here and there. But this was like a dream come true at the time. Like the place, working at entry level jobs when you're in high school, and every dollar that I would make, I would spend at this place. And now they're asking me to work there. So I felt like I kind of hit the lottery in a sense.
Well, I'm hoping you got the good employee discount structure as well.
Yeah. So, well, that's the next side of the story is, so I'm right outside of Washington, D.C. So traffic's really bad around here. And I'm actually in Maryland, and this place was in Virginia. So I'd get out of high school at 2:00, and with the traffic and everything, it would take me an hour to drive there, and they closed at 5:00. So I'd drive for 2 hours to work for 2 hours. So it was kind of dumb, and I don't know, maybe a blessing, maybe a curse, but the owner, maybe after working there for like 2 or 3 months, like pulled me into his office. I'm like, figured I'm getting fired or whatever. But turns out he'd made the decision to actually move the whole business to Florida. So I lost the job pretty early on, but that was me kind of feeling like maybe I wanted to work in this industry a little bit. And they did have like a technician or two, and they did some minor installation. Like they were in more of a retail spot than a traditional car spot. So like they weren't allowed to work on cars there. They just sort of did it. And so, yeah, they had some techs. So I was around, watching guys install suspensions and some intake manifolds. And I remember still to this day, a buddy of mine that worked there, he installed some like a boost gauge and some miscellaneous gauges and stuff. And when he was finished with the install, like usually when that stuff would get installed, you'd see every wire and everything just draped across the intake manifold and the valve. It was like the worst thing you'd ever seen. And he installed all this stuff, and I went and looked at the engine bay afterwards, and I legitimately couldn't find where he installed any of it.
It is nice when someone actually takes pride in their work.
Yeah, especially back then. Like
rarer than you would like to think it is, but yeah.
So that was I was like, this is cool. And then
obviously this lit the fire for you. You could see a direction here.
Yep, 100%. And the Volkswagen guys absolutely hated the Honda guys, and vice versa. So those were like the two feuds. And then the import guys didn't get along with the domestic guys.
I think to a degree you'd say that's probably still the case. It might have thawed a little bit. I remember at least in New Zealand when I got into import drag racing, and it was all V8s and mostly US domestic, maybe some Australian cars as well. And we were not liked at the drag strip. And then once we'd been sort of running these cars for a few years, and my car was up at maybe 1,200 horsepower, and we started running into the 8s, and at that point I think we started getting a little bit of respect, and maybe these guys aren't so bad after all. But yeah, definitely at the start it was an icy relationship.
Yes. So I basically have a very similar story. So my friend that got me into the Volkswagen stuff, when the new, like the 2000-ish like Civic SIs came out, there was this like super cocky, run his mouth kind of Honda guy that was always, a trouble. Anyways, they managed to run into each other on the road. And my friend with the VR6 like thought he was just going to destroy this new stupid Honda. And it was the exact opposite. So this Civic SI just like pulled away from him like it was nothing. So I kind of was shocked that my friend almost immediately sold the Volkswagen and then bought a Civic Si.
Oh, jump ship.
Yeah. So, and then he went to college, and I went and visited him at college one time, and 3 or 4 of his buddies all had turbo Honda Civics. And we just kind of hang out, and, each time we went somewhere new, I'd ride in a different one of the cars, and some of them were single cams. And the guy that owned like a restaurant or something, he had a turbo Civic Si like in 2000. So that was, big money, and hard to believe that was possible. But that was the moment that I was like, okay, this is me, I guess. That was my new identity at that point, was all the turbo Honda stuff.
I think it's fair to say that the Hondas really take just so well to turbocharge. I mean, clearly you bolt a turbocharger on any engine, it's gonna make more power. But the B series and the K series, they just work so well with a properly sized turbocharger.
Oh yeah, and they're so fun. To this day, I still think that, and a lot of people would disagree with this, but there's an element of the torqueless, high revving 4-cylinder stuff that in some ways I think is more fun to drive than some of the V8 stuff. A majority of the V8 cars, especially manual transmission in first gear, if you hit the gas, you're just going to spin and go sideways. And then the 4-cylinders, you can actually drive them hard, and the car will accelerate to a point. Like obviously it gets to a point with diminishing returns, but the driving experience is completely different. And if anybody doesn't like the 4-cylinder stuff, I 100% understand. But if anybody prefers the 4-cylinder stuff over the V8 stuff, again, I totally understand.
Well, it's funny. I came from a background, as I said, we have access to every Japanese car made. Well, I think we do anyway. So I've always been a JDM guy through and through. And back when we were drag racing, the drag scene here in New Zealand, with a few exceptions, most of the guys running V8 cars weren't exactly breaking any world records. There was the odd one that was going into the 6s or the 7s, but most of the cars that looked like they had a few $100,000 thrown on them, you'd sort of be expecting big things, and it'd come off the line and knock out like a 10-0 or something like that. And you're like, okay, my road legal Evo did that on its second pass, but never mind. And I didn't have a lot of passion behind the V8s, and then we started through my old shop tuning Australian domestic market, Holden Commodore, which was basically LS, Pontiac G8 sort of stuff. And I kind of quickly found with that LS market, no big surprise, hey, chuck a cam, headers and an exhaust on them, these things go pretty good. And for not a lot of money, you can actually get good gains. And that started opening my eyes to the V8 market. And now at the point I'm in, I couldn't care less. Is it a rotary? Is it a V8? Is it a V12? Is it a turbo 4-cylinder? Hey, they've all got pros and cons. If it's a cool engine, if it's a cool car, I'm all about it.
That's 100% where I'm at. And then the financial aspect of what you're trying to do with the car. Like if it's some crappy $300 car and you want to do a swap and you want to make 500 horsepower, there's 2 or 3 engines that you can choose, and you can do that for next to nothing, or you can choose some other engine and it's 20 times more expensive. And the more expensive, cooler swap might be cooler situationally, depending on what it is that you're doing. But if you're going to have a cheap kind of junky crashing into walls and stuff kind of car, there's something about like the LS or the B series or those common engines where you can get any part that you want for next to nothing. That makes it fun.
I found that was a common theme I found, again, running my old shop, was customers coming in. We were known for modifying Evos, but we probably actually modified more Hondas and Subarus than Evos, just because there were more of them on the roads and they were more affordable back then. And you'd get a customer come in and they wanted, let's say they had an Evo 8 and they wanted 400 horse at the wheels. We had a combination that would do that for not a huge amount of money, and it was proven time and time again. But no, they wanted to use this exhaust manifold and this turbocharger that we'd never heard of before, and a different type of ECU. And you're just like, but why? I want to be different.
Yep.
And yeah, sure, to a degree, I kind of get that. If everyone's going down the same path, sometimes it's nice to do things a little different. You've just got to understand that doing things different could actually end up with a worse result, and it's almost certainly going to end up with a much more expensive and time-consuming result.
You basically just described where I would have gone with that conversation in terms of when guys choose to build the D-Series stuff instead of the B-Series.
Yeah.
And it's like, just especially at that point in time, it's like go buy a Honda LS motor for $400 and use that as your starting platform, and you're going to spend half as much money and get twice as much out of it, and more importantly, it's going to last 20 times longer.
Unfortunately, those sort of people quite often, I find at least, are of the what would you know mentality. And by the time they've found out that you're right, they've already gone and spent all of that money anyway, and sort of come back with their tail between their legs like, oh, okay, yeah, so what should I do now? Oh, just the thing I told you to do 6 months ago.
I had a customer he's been a customer for 15 years. And every time I would give him a quote on doing anything, we knew each other well enough that he could sort of say what he was thinking. And he'd, chew my head off that it was too expensive, and then he would go and do it himself, and then he would come back to me. He's like, I see why it was that much. I should have just paid you. Like, you give him a price to build a custom header, like hood exit header, and cut the hood out and trim it and all of that. And he's like, man, I had to buy like 3 hoods because they kept trashing them. He's like, it was so much more expensive to do it on my own than just giving you what you wanted to do. I'd be like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think that's one of those situations where something always on face value seems easier than it is, and then you're 3 hours into that 30-minute job, cursing and swearing, looking for the lost 10mm socket, and yeah, that's when you realize, oh, that's why they charge what they charge. Not actually trying to just stitch me up. They just know what this job is going to entail and what it's going to cost. The thing that frustrated me, we had a couple of local shops. And I mean, originally I was dealing probably mainly with younger guys, occasionally girls, but hey, let's be honest, it's mostly guys.
I think I've had 3 female customers the entire time I've been doing this.
That they're the exception to the norm for sure. And yeah, they've always got champagne dreams and beer budgets. They come in and get a quote for, you'd straight away know this is going nowhere. I'm just about to waste an hour of my time. And you give them a quote for whatever it might be, 15, 20 grand, and they go away and you wouldn't hear from them again for about 6 to 12 months. And then they'd come back and they'd gone to one of the other shops with my quote. Basically, the other shop said, oh, we can do it for half of that. And of course, that they couldn't do it properly for half of that. And then they come back with a car that's running like shit. Oh, can you fix it? It's like, well, on principle, I really don't want to. But, it's like, pay the money. What's the saying? Buy it once, buy it right, and you're going to get the result you want. It's going to cost you possibly a little bit more up front, but you're going to get the right result. Anyway, I digress. Let's get back to your story.
Oh yeah, all the turbo Hondas. So at that point, life went on. I was in school and just working normal, like boring jobs. A good friend of mine started a skateboard shop, and I was real big into skateboarding all through growing up. And I helped him start that and worked there and all of that. And long story short, one day some guy came in that he knew, and I just happened to be there. And he introduced me as like, this guy owns the new performance shop that just opened up down the road. I'm like, well, how the hell did I not know that this was there? And it turns out like by just opened up, like they hadn't opened the doors yet. They're still setting up shop and all that. And I had a MR2 Turbo at that point in time. And I was looking for a boost controller, and he happened to have one. So he told me to swing by, check out the shop, and I bought it from him or whatever. And I think I paid, I don't remember how much it was, like $200 or $300, which was a lot of money at the time. And I remember I handed him the money, handed me the boost controller, and he just kind of like set the money on like a tool cart as if like he didn't care about it. And meanwhile, I'm like, damn, that's like my life savings that you're just like totally uninterested in it. And I'm looking around, and he had just done big purchase orders with, you name it, the different companies for inventory for the shop. And I'm looking around, and there's lifts, and he just brand new sparkling dyno jet 248. It was
no expense spared.
I mean, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars, no questions asked. And I'm just looking around in like complete awe. And this is
what sort of year are we talking here?
This is probably 2003, maybe 2004, something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
And dynos were unheard of back then. So
yeah, I was just going to say back then, dynos weren't on every corner.
Exactly. And this was like a mile from my house. And by my house, I mean like my parents' house at the time where I was still living. And I'm one of the most introverted people you'll ever meet. So I don't really remember specifically. I probably said like 3 words and then looked around and left. And once again, I got my buddy from the skateboard shop was like, hey, so-and-so, he's looking for like an entry-level, person to help out at the shop or whatever. Like, would you be interested? And like, obviously I'd be interested. So then I actually started working at what I've been known for forever is my current shop, Tempest Racing. I actually started off as just an employee there before I took over. And when I started, again, as far as working on cars, very little experience. I was doing a little bit more of my own stuff, bolting on an exhaust here and there, but
not a qualified mechanic though.
Yeah, no, not at all. So he had myself and one other technician who was more experienced than me, but not as experienced as the owner. And I don't know, probably a couple of years, just at it 6 days a week, loving every minute of it at that point in time. And
can't help but start to get good at something if you're doing it all the time.
Yeah. And yes, I went to college for a couple of years and got an associate's degree, but the biggest problem was I didn't have a clue in the world what I wanted to do. So if I wouldn't have gotten into this car stuff, I couldn't tell you, like, no clue. I work, again, I live near DC, so I probably would have had some government job and I would have commuted 2 hours each way to work, and it would have been miserable.
Doesn't sound like fun to me.
No, not at all.
So at this point, actually explain to me, in the US, do you have to become a qualified mechanic to work on cars? In New Zealand, we do have a mechanical apprenticeship scheme. I would say, I'm taking a guess here that if you want to go and work at maybe a dealership, you probably are not going to get a job unless you're qualified. But a lot of just sort of run-of-the-mill mechanic shops, probably, if you can spin spanners and you can prove that you know what you're doing, the qualification probably doesn't mean much. How's it work in the US?
It's kind of interesting that you asked that question that way, because I guess it's more so known here now than it used to be. But one of what I would say the biggest flaws of this industry is that my 8-year-old daughter is equally as qualified to do my job as I am. Like, there is literally no qualifications whatsoever. Somebody could open up with zero experience and $30 worth of tools at Harbor Freight could open up a shop directly next to mine, and there's nothing that would prevent that from happening.
I just assumed there would be some more rules around it, given how strict the US is in some areas, and then I guess how open it is in others.
Yep, you would think so. And like you said, some of the dealerships will have some qualifications, but it's not like a law. I think that's more of just the brand of the dealership and that type of a thing. But
in saying that though, and this is not said to discredit qualified mechanics that are listening to this and about to come and start throwing their ring spanners at me. I think what I see these days is the mechanics going through a qualification scheme, apprenticeship, are maybe not learning the skills that are necessary at a performance level. And a lot of it now with modern cars, of course, comes down to diagnostics, and they're getting more and more complicated. So a lot of it comes down to, can you drive a diagnostic tool, a scan tool properly? How good are you at fault finding? You're not going to as frequently be, let's say, replacing cam belts. Yes, I know that obviously still gets done, but as time goes on, more modern vehicles run chains, not cam belts, so that becomes less common. If an engine needs the rings replaced, back in the day, you'd tear that engine down, you'd hone the cylinders, you'd re-ring it. Now it's more likely that a replacement engine is going to be dropped in. So obviously you can't say this is an all-encompassing situation, but I think more and more of that is happening. So the qualified mechanics these days maybe aren't as competent with the high level of modification that we would be doing in a performance workshop. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and again, the disclaimer for nobody to come and fight me after I say this, but after years and years and years of doing this, 9 times out of 10, when I would have a customer bring cars, whether that be for tuning or additional work that they didn't want to do, like especially like welding fabrication, you can rebuild engines and not know how to build a turbo manifold, like 2 completely different skill sets.
Yeah, absolutely.
But more often than not, when I would have like a master certified technician at a dealership bring the car in, almost always had the most problems. And most of those guys all work flat rate, so they're trying to do everything as fast as humanly possible. Yeah. So I don't know if stuff gets missed that way. And then certification. So I was big on welding fabrication. I did a bunch of aerospace welding. I did some titanium welding for Joe Gibbs Racing, the NASCAR team. Like, they had an aerospace program. And I had to pass a bunch of welding tests in order to legally be able to do any of this stuff. Yeah. But the welding tests were a joke. Like, I think I trained people to take these tests with no welding experience, and sure, it might take them a week or 2, but the easiest way that I describe the welding test is it was like a trick shot in pool. Okay. Like, you might be able to hit the ball and make it jump and do this stuff, but that's not going to help you like actually play pool. Sure. It's just completely different.
That is somewhat disappointing and equal parts worrying. I would like to think that if you are going through an exam or a test on your ability to weld, I'd really like to know that weld is actually structurally sound.
Well, I will give credit to that. They do everything. So very interesting is the process after you weld parts for aerospace, all of the testing that happens to the parts afterwards. That side of it, there's nothing to worry about. If there's anything wrong with any of it, it gets caught. And depending on what it is, it either gets completely thrown away and remade or it gets repaired and nothing passes through the cracks. There's engineers on top of engineers checking the last engineer's work and x-rays and different machines. And the pressure testing is insane. Like, they test some of these parts at don't quote me on this, 3,000 PSI or something. And they're in these big water tanks, so that if something does break loose or whatever, it doesn't blow the whole building up. And
smart.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. But the base welding to pass the tests, I don't know, it's just not what I was expecting.
Sure. If you're a fan of the podcast and you're interested in topics like engine tuning, automotive wiring, performance engine building, 3D modeling in CAD, or anything else in the high-performance industry, I have something that you might be interested in. Introducing the High Performance Academy VIP package. This package of courses gives you lifetime access to all of HPA's online training for one price. These courses cover everything from tuning and reflashing petrol and diesel engines, through to motorsport wiring, engine building, fabrication, design, car setup, and plenty more. Right now, you can get $500 off High Performance Academy's VIP package using the code podcast500 at checkout. Becoming a VIP means you'll never pay for another course again. You'll get instant access to all 40 plus courses we currently offer, plus every new course we ever release in the future. Want to define maps or tune with WinOLS? Curious about CAN bus devices, or how CAD can help make your dream build a reality? These in-depth topics, as well as many others, each have their own dedicated course that are going to help you master whatever it is you want to learn. And as a VIP member, you're not just getting the courses, you'll also join HPA's online community with lifetime access to our member forums and members' webinar lessons. Again, the code is podcast500 for that $500 discount. Just head over to hpacademy.com to check out the full VIP package and everything it contains. All right, let's get back to the episode. Well, let's move on to your experience learning to tune. Obviously, you moved up from mechanical work to tuning, which is where you're at now. I'm just going to go on a limb here and guess that you were sort of learning from the original owner of the business.
That's what I would have assumed, but the tuning was his baby, and I guess the welding was too. So ironically, like my two things that I like within the industry are the welding, fabrication, and the tuning. That's what he liked. So he did 100% of all of that. And I guess not to get too much into like his personal side of things, but let's just call it a midlife crisis to simplify it. And long story short, he just kind of quit coming to work one day, and things kind of fell apart from there. And at this point, I was the one answering the phones, and if customers came in, I was talking to them. And there was this point where we had 5 or 6 cars that needed to be tuned and needed stuff welded before they could leave. And these customers were calling, coming by. They could clearly tell that weeks had gone by and nothing had happened. Something's wrong. And I just got tired of kind of having to
make excuses.
Yeah, exactly. So I remember after everyone left one day, I just stayed, and I didn't go to sleep that night. I turned the welder on, and I taught myself how to weld. And it wasn't pretty, but 2 pieces of metal would stick together.
Yep. That's how we all start.
Ultimately, basically after I did that, I got a couple of cars to the next point, because I was far less intimidated with the welder than I was with the dyno. And I had run cars on the dyno and driven cars on the dyno, but I'd never tuned anything. And the very first car had a Apex AFC in it. And like I knew what an air fuel ratio was.
Yeah.
And there was no logging, through an ECU or anything at that point. So it was usually tailpipe sniffer in the tailpipe that was being logged through the dyno, or maybe you put the sensor directly in. And I just started. It was kind of a low stakes car where if it blew up, they would have not been good, but it wasn't a Ferrari or something.
Is this something naturally aspirated?
Yes, yeah, naturally aspirated.
Yeah, I think like that's almost the perfect starting point. It's not a full standalone. It's a very basic piggyback. You're just kind of tweaking fuel up and down versus RPM. I think that is literally the best place that you could get started.
Yes, absolutely. And so yeah.
And also, I'd also say, I mean, we did hundreds of those sorts of controllers, and mainly onto naturally aspirated Hondas. And if you've got a basic bolt-on B series, it's almost all you need. Like you're not going to go and put a standalone on it and make another 30 horsepower. You'll refine it a little bit more, but I mean, it actually does a pretty good job for what it is, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, the VTEC ones had the VAFC had the VTEC activation controlling point, and you bring the VTEC down for 1,000 RPM from whatever it was before, and it feels like you just put a supercharger on in the mid-range.
Yeah.
So pretty significant gains there. Yeah, that was AFC. And then I think I did a few of those. And at some point during this, the owner came back to work and was kind of asking questions like, where did that car go? I'm like, well, I thought maybe you died. So I just finished it up and got it out of here. And so then he was like, oh, okay, well, you can do that now or whatever. And from there, I think the next one that I did was a Hondata. This was before they were S200. It was stage 2. It had the little blue box and the cable.
Ugh, that's actually before my time. I don't get stuck into Hondata until the S300, which is probably maybe a good thing.
Yes, yeah. Oh, I would once the S300 came out.
Game changer.
Yeah, I did a few of the earlier ones with the chip burning and stuff, but ultimately I got to the point where I was like, you know what, I'm not doing those anymore. Like S300's $495 back then. I was like, you can swing that. I didn't know how to do it properly because there was like an emulator and like an external data logger and then the chip and the chip burner. And I didn't know how to make it all work together. So I was like, I just did what I did before. And I watched the air-fuel trace on the dyno. And I pulled this chip out of the computer and put it in the chip burner. And I just started hitting buttons on the Honda. The software is very similar. The earlier stuff versus the S300. There's a little less adjustability, but the main tables all look the same.
Yep, look and feels the same.
Yeah, so just started playing around with that and got pretty good at it. And then Hondata came out with the S300, like you had mentioned. And Hondata did a live training in Virginia. It was only like an hour or something away at a hotel. And I got this random email of like, hey, we're doing this live training for our new product. You want to come? It's just for our dealers. I'm like, well, that sounds interesting. So I went to that, and Doug gave a whole presentation on the new S300. And I remember leaving there thinking like, oh, this is pretty cool. I don't have to burn these stupid chips anymore. This is great.
Yeah.
And then I got my hands on my first car with S300. And at that point, somehow it felt like there was 12,000 more tables than there was before. And I just remember feeling like completely overwhelmed with it. And then I had so many files from the earlier stuff that no longer I could use with the S300. So
you're starting from scratch again.
Yeah, my library was like starting all over again. So I kind of struggled. The first few cars I did with it, I didn't really care for it too much. And then eventually it grew on me. And oh man, I don't know if I've made it to 1,000 S300 cars, but it feels like it's got to be close. It's in the, multiple hundreds for sure.
I mean, it's a powerful system for what is essentially still using the factory ECU.
It's amazing to me that an ECU from Honda from 1992 is capable of all of that, regardless of what, software, hardware you're putting into it, but just the base, function of the ECU.
One thing I would say, and maybe it's just because I didn't do enough of them, trying to run a B series or a K series on ITBs on Hondata, that is not an enjoyable experience.
Not ideal.
At least in my experience.
I've done a few that worked out okay. One of the cars that kicked my butt more than any other happened to be an ITB car with Hondata. And I just learned that there's certain things that you say no to. and that's on that list.
Yep. It's one of those, there is a time and a place for different solutions in terms of tuning, and Hondata will cover probably 95% of what most people are doing. But then that other 5%, hey, you could do it on a Hondata, probably you could do it. Is it the best choice? Probably almost certainly not. And I think those are smart choices to not try and drive that square peg into the round hole.
Absolutely. I think for the average person, I think this has been a problem for a really long time. And this isn't just ECUs. This is a lot of things in life, is that if somebody's interested in an ECU, for example, and they pull up 5 different manufacturers' websites and they start reading the description of what they offer, if you don't know what you're looking at, they all sound exactly the same.
Yeah, I mean, you can say on your spec list that you do traction control or you do boost control.
100. Or not control and traction control. They're not all created equal.
Yeah.
And I'm fairly certain on Hondata's site, at least it used to, like very specifically say it worked with ITBs. So I see why people would end up with it. And then once somebody's already made that purchase and they already have it, trying to talk them into something else,
it's a tough one.
Can be difficult. Especially, I don't know if you found it the same way, but there's almost an element of dealing with people that are overly excited that makes everything like significantly more difficult than it needs to be, because they just want it. They want it done now because they're excited, and you can't turn that off for people.
Yeah, I agree. I found exactly the same. All right, so I take it you moved into the K series as well, and that's another learning curve with now adding variable intake cams and just a whole shitload of maps.
Yes. So as you can imagine, going from S300 to K Pro for the first time and seeing all 12,850 maps that were available, I'm like, this is dumb. I don't want to do this.
Actually, for those who have got no idea what we're talking about, the way that Honda system worked in that generation is that the cam was variable across 50 degrees. So every 10 degrees from 0 to 50, you had a separate fuel and ignition map. But not only that, you had those for both high cam and low cam. So the in essence, what that would mean is that if it's tuned properly, and I would imagine almost none of them are tuned this thoroughly, you could set your VTEC point wherever you want, and you could swing your intake cam all over the place, and you would have the correct fueling and ignition timing irrespective. And that's what it could achieve. But holy shit, it's a lot of work to do that.
Yeah, the concept of it is great, and when you actually spend the time to do it, it works great. But nobody wants to pay you to do that. And watching countless other people tune these things, these guys are tuning these K-Series cars in 3 pulls, collecting the money and sending them down the road. So like,
that's not tuned.
You didn't even tune the high cam and the low cam on one cam angle, let alone all 25,000 of them. So that was a mess. And we were so somehow, some way, we almost became a H22 shop.
Okay.
Which was weird because it was kind of the bastard child engine for Hondas.
Yeah, it was never really popular in New Zealand. I mean, I've done a few of them, but yeah, definitely it'll be 10 to 1 of those between sort of B series and K series, maybe 20 to 1 even.
Yeah, that might even go higher than that, but
yeah.
So we did tons of H22 stuff and just an infinite amount of B series stuff. And at some point I built a B series race car for myself, and we were so busy with the B series stuff that there was no time to start working with the K series stuff. And the K series stuff was just astronomically expensive when it first came out because, there were the engine in the brand new cars. And it seems like the transmissions were made out of glass. And there was probably 4 other shops in the area to me that were going down the K-Series road like really hard.
Being a pioneer with a brand new platform as well, and obviously at that point no one knew the popularity, success and ease of tunability of the K-Series. It's expensive and time consuming being that pioneer.
Yeah, oh yeah.
It's much easier to come in a few years later and, oh yeah, well these guys have figured it all out, I'm just going to basically do what the recipe that works. Everyone else has done the hard work.
Yeah, and I'm sure you know who Norris. How do you say his last name? Preontu.
Yep, Preontu Racing. Yeah, I interviewed him. I think at a drag meeting. I can't remember which one. Yeah.
Yeah, but long story short, his shop was 45 minutes from me, and you could almost single-handedly say that he's responsible for the initial growth of the K-Series stuff. They did so much of it. And you go and watch them race at the track, and they'd usually, I think he has even more cars now, but he'd have 3 or 4 cars that they were racing, all K-Series, and it didn't go smooth at first. So you're watching these guys between rounds, changing out motors. And again, these are motors out of brand new cars. So you're kind of doing some loose math in your head. And I'm like, man, that was a really expensive race for you guys.
Yeah.
And like, I didn't have the budget for that. My customers didn't have the budget for that. So I kind of steered clear of the K-Series stuff. And I'd almost argue that would be a regret of mine when it comes to a lot of what we did with the Honda stuff is I should have went down that road more. And, I just didn't. And what's ironic now is that the K-Series stuff is half the price of the B-Series stuff. If you're looking for it like on the secondhand market or whatever, like the B-Series stuff's just becoming extinct. If you can find a B-Series hydraulic transmission for less than $1,000, like you're doing pretty good. You used to be able to buy those all day long for $200.
Yeah, I'd say the same situation exists here in New Zealand. The cars themselves have just skyrocketed in price, and it's almost sad because back when I was young and sort of learning about cars, you could buy like a DC2 Type R Integra or Civic or whatever it might have been for modest amount of money. A young guy with an entry-level job could sort of save up and actually afford something like that. And now these days, that's obviously no longer the case. And I don't think we really have that same level of cool enthusiast spec affordable cars that the sort of 16 to 20-year-old crowd can sort of get into and modify, but it's probably a little bit off our topic, I think, anyway. I'm interested, so far you're obviously a JDM guy through and through, and really the reason we've got you on the podcast is the opposite end of that. So it's not often I see someone sort of do a switch from JDM to US domestic. So how did this all sort of pan out for you?
I had actually my landlord that I was renting a shop from had a Camaro with just absolutely obnoxious camshaft in it. And he had unrealistic expectations that he wanted this thing to idle at 400 RPM or whatever it was. And at this point, I've probably messed with 2 or 3 cars with HP tuners. And he's literally my landlord I'm renting the shop from. He wants me to fool with it, and I agreed to do that. And I get the thing. I mean, it sounds rowdy. It sounds very desirable. And I posted. I took a video of it with my phone. I posted it on Instagram. And as black and white as can be, we went from a Honda only shop to a domestic shop from one Instagram video. Wow. I got more messages and phone calls and stuff of like, oh, you're doing domestic cars now. Can you do mine? Can you do mine? And so started fooling with some HP tuner stuff. And I'm sure you know Jeff Evans.
Yes.
So I kind of told him what was going on. He's 3-4 hours away from me. And he was like, I can show you some HP tuner stuff. Just come down. And I basically bought a day of his time to walk me through HP tuners.
I wanted to get into that because I remember my experience transitioning from standalone to reflashing using HP tuners. And I imagine that my experience is probably going to mirror just about everyone who started in the standalone world. You know, at the time, we'd set world records. I considered myself to be expert level at tuning standalones. And you go to the reflashing world and realize how an OE controller works, and it's almost like going back to square one. And the principle, particularly when they're math based, or a lot of factory cars are math based, and then in the GM world you've got the speed density subsystem and then virtual volumetric efficiency. It's like, okay, whoa, let's stop. Okay, so interesting. So Jeff kind of got you started.
Yeah, so you explained it. Like I could fiddle through some of it, and I knew I could learn more, and more importantly, I knew I could learn faster working with somebody. So I went and spent the day with Jeff, and basically at the end of the day, I left like, okay, cool. Like I'm 10 years ahead of where I was before I did this, and then started messing with the cars, and I just realized that I didn't like it very much. It wasn't as fun as the standalone stuff. And, you know, you want to change one little tiny thing, and now you got to flash it and sit there and wait for 5 minutes to see if the change that you made actually worked. And I had a car come through that we just built a turbo kit for it. And he wanted us to tune it, had HP tuners. And this was in a Fox body with LS swap, and it was on HP tuners. And my whole thing at that point was kind of like, man, I get HP tuners 100% when you're dealing with a car that was, you know, came with that motor and you just plug it in and there's nothing else to it. But if we're at the point where we're rewiring this whole car to use this factory ECU, I'm like, there's got to be another option.
I think this mirrors exactly what we were just talking about with the Hondata. Yeah, you absolutely can do it. And I'm not trying to take away from HP tuners as a platform here. Yes, you could make thousands of horsepower, you can engine swap, you can trans swap, you can do all of those things. But is it the best and simplest solution for that particular application and what you're talking about? I'd have put a standalone on it in a heartbeat.
Yep. So simplest is the biggest thing, because not only for this particular guy, he wants to race the car and he wants to be able to make adjustments on his own. He can't do that with HP tuners without
learning how to tune.
Learning how to do it, buying the cable, paying for credits, all this stuff. I'm like, why don't we just put an ECU in this? And obviously there's numerous ones to choose from, but at this point I had noticed that Holley had started gaining a lot of popularity, and this is before Terminator X. Actually, when I say this is before Terminator X, I mean we paid the money for the HP ECU that's like double the price or whatever. And it showed up. And I want to say the day that the HP showed up was the day that they introduced the Terminator X, which would have been the perfect solution for this car. So it's funny how that works.
Timing couldn't have been worse.
Yeah, exactly. So
actually, let's just pause this here. I'm going to jump back a little bit. So let's put a pin in this because we'll get back here in a second. One thing I will say about that transition from standalone to reflashing, which I worked out once I was confident and familiar, like, yes, there's a million tables, there's a million parameters, and it all looks super scary. But I mean, our bread and butter was over the radiator cold air intake, headers, high flow cats, and a 2.5-inch or a 3-inch exhaust system, depending on whether the guy wanted to have his ears bleeding on an open road cruise. So that was our bread and butter, and we were doing sometimes sort of 3 to 5 of these a week. And when the modifications are that limited, what you actually have to change is so limited in the ECU. So rescale the mass airflow sensor, and once you understand how those work, that's a piece of cake. And if you get that right, everything else just works. Change your power enrichment targets to suit, timing, do some work in the knock control because that's super aggressive and the decay's just so slow. Send it out the door, customer's happy, and literally with those, I could probably spend more time putting the car on and off our dyno than the actual tune. Like, yeah, sure, get into heads and cams, things are a different sort of situation there, a lot more work. But, you know, for the basic sort of, let's call it stage 1 upgrade, reflashing, it's just a walk in the park. It works, it's easy, and the result's going to be great. So sorry to derail that. I just wanted to, before we think that half the people listening now have put off reflashing their cars, it's a very powerful solution.
I 100% tell people that if you wanted to make, and I'm a full believer of this, if you wanted to make the maximum amount of money, reflashing, I think, is the solution. There's an infinite number of cars that need it and want it. And
yeah, and when you're doing the same thing over and over, this is both a blessing and a curse. You get really good at it. You get a library of calibrations that you can know, like, oh, I've got this cam, I load this in, it's going to probably be within 3 or 4%. Fine tune it, out the door, done, and the customer absolutely stoked. But the flip side of that is I am not the sort of person who wants to do cookie cutter work. Day after day, I want to do new and interesting things because that's what keeps my mind active and keeps me happy. So, you know, those two things, there's a disconnect.
Seems like we're on the same page on so many things. I found every 3 years is when I'm like, okay, I got to do something different and change it up a little bit. But back to the Fox body. So he wanted to be able to tune it himself. Or not tuning himself, but like make enough changes. He wanted launch control, which he couldn't do with HP tuners. He wanted boost control, which he couldn't do with HP tuners. He was adamant on a wideband with like fail safes or, you know, cutoffs or whatever. And obviously the HP tuners don't have any type of like full throttle, like lambda feedback or anything like that. So for him, I was just like, well, here's this thing. It's not that expensive. It comes with a harness, and did everything he wanted to do. So put Holley on this particular car, put it on the dyno, and I'd never used it before, and got it started and running effortlessly, made 1 or 2 pulls on it, and it was in the ballpark. And I'm like, man, this is pretty straightforward. And this does everything that 98% of people are going to need, especially at the level of cars that I work on. Is I prefer the, I guess, more street-ish type of cars. The race car stuff is super interesting to me. I like seeing them. I like being around them. I like going to the track. I like having them. I rent my dyno out all the time. I have tons of big power stuff, but especially with 2 little kids, I don't have the time to dedicate to these race car guys. Are like 100% weekends and late nights, and everything is more of a rush off of the track than it is on the track.
Yeah, it doesn't really, it's not conducive to sort of family time, is it?
Yeah, so there's that element of it. And then I feel like I'm 30 years behind the curve compared to these guys that have been tuning these big power race cars forever. Like, I'm sure if I was decided I'm going to dedicate the next year or 2 or 3 or however many it takes to getting good at it, I'm sure you could progress and get good at it and be like competitive. But
here's the thing I'd say about that. I mean, not coming from a background where I've been tuning 2, 3, 4,000 horsepower engines, I think it's kind of seen as this big sort of holy grail achievement. The reality is it's still just fuel, air, and timing. And the ability to make and support 3,000 horsepower is not so much about the brilliance of the tuner. Sure, you need to know what you're doing clearly, but it starts just with a combination that's actually built to handle that level of cylinder pressure. And then provided you've got your fuel ratios on target and the thing is not knocking its head off, you know about that very, very quickly at 3,000 horsepower. What I'm saying, I think there's probably an argument to be made that it is more difficult to make a street car cold start in the middle of winter when there's snow on the ground, cold start when it's the middle of summer and you're getting sunburnt, just like a factory car, sit there and idle with the aircon on and off, pull away from a stoplight perfectly every time, not stall when you come up to a giveaway sign. Those are the things that I actually think are probably arguably harder than being able to run an engine at 10,000 RPM wide open throttle and make 3,000 horsepower. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I would 100% agree. So I have a mainline Pro Hub dyno. I rent it out all the time to all kinds of big power cars and worked with well over 100 different tuners tuning these things. And the big difference between a 1,000 horsepower car and a 2,000 horsepower car is just the amount of money that was spent and the quality of the parts for the most part. And it's surprising how forgiving a lot of these cars are, in a sense of, for all intents and purposes, you can have like a pretty bad tune in the car and it still just makes power.
Particularly when you get onto really good quality fuels, let's say methanol.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you can run that thing so fat that it's starting to misfire and it'll make great power. It's the lean edge that you want to stay well away from. So you've got this nice wide envelope, provided you've got an ignition system that's good enough to light the stuff off. You don't need to be running this thing on the lean, ragged edge to make great power. And I mean, chances are, unless you're sort of talking 3 figures of boost pressure, it's very knock resistant as well. So it is a fuel that is forgiving to a degree. Now, also, I sort of just made out before that tuning 3,000 horsepower drag cars is child's play. I just want to clarify what I mean by that. Making the power is not as challenging, I believe, as most people think. However, getting that thing to go down the track and beat the guy in the other lane, now that is challenging. And that is about power management. So yeah, I wanted to just make sure that I wasn't trying to say that drag racing is a walk in the park. Yeah, once you're starting to make serious power, it's all about tuning the car to the track. But actually making huge horsepower numbers, that part's not as difficult as most people think.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I was going with that when I said if I spent 1, 2, 3 years trying to figure that out. That's what I was referring to as the power management.
Yeah.
And I think at that level, when you're a successful tuner with these big power drag cars, you're making such small changes to with the laptop between rounds. And I feel like knowing when to swap stators on converters or when to change this bar angle or when to, like, all of that stuff seems to be what separates the guys that are really successful with it and the guys that aren't.
Yeah. The challenge there as well is there's so many minor aspects into drag racing that all go into the pass. The track prep and even the evolution of the track during an event. It's not going to be the same from one pass in the morning where it's maybe a little bit cooler to a pass in the afternoon where there's more UV and the track temps come up. And the really, really competent crew chiefs are adjusting for all of these elements pass by pass on the fly. There's just so much that goes into it. And I was never a chassis guy, so I wasn't making adjustments to the forelink or the rebound on the shocks or anything like that. I'm just looking at the data going down the track. Like, oh yeah, we can put more power in second gear here. We need a little bit out in third. That was my kind of jam.
Yeah. And again, when I was racing like our Hondas and stuff, suspension tuning was just having the suspension so stiff in the rear that it just didn't work. And, the rest of it was, boost control, or maybe you're swinging some timing. And I remember like putting an M800 in the car and having like time-based rev limiters was like the greatest thing that had ever happened.
Yeah. Let's move back into this Holley situation. So, I guess maybe coming up to modern day, give us sort of a rundown on what the Holley ecosystem looks like in terms of products that they have available, and specifically what you're supporting.
So they have the most entry-level stuff, which is the throttle body injection, the Holley Snipers. And it's probably, I don't have data to back this up, but it's probably like one of the most popular EFI systems of all time. It seems like they are everywhere on every car. And
I'll give my experience on the Sniper 2 shortly, but I'll let you continue.
Yeah, tons and tons of those. And then there's some of the throttle body injection systems that aren't the Sniper and actually use like the HP ECU. Holley's naming convention can be really confusing to people. So the throttle body injection with the HP ECU is called a Terminator, but then their next system in the lineup in terms of like price and what it can do is actually just called a Terminator X. And then there's an HP, which how do you go from Terminator in Sniper to just HP? It's kind of weird.
Yep, that is weird.
And then you got the big one, which is the Dominator. So I guess you could say I support all of them. And this isn't unique to Holley. This is any lineup of ECUs. If you have a more cost-effective option versus a more expensive option, you tend to run into more problems with the cost-effective option, whether that's the product itself or the customers choosing to buy the cheaper option, or you know where I'm going with that.
I totally understand. I mean, I think when the customer's choice is driven by the price point, it's not just the ECU that was also driven by price point. So you just, not to say that you can't build a budget combination that works, but history would suggest from what I saw across my dyno that 8 out of 10 times it may work, but it's going to be a lot more work in getting it to that point.
Yes. And so I always say that tuning a Holley Sniper is either going to be the best day or the worst day of work that you could have. Because when everything is working great, it's super simple. It works. It does what it's supposed to do. But I just find that the other reality of it is it's the most entry-level way to get into EFI for most people. So, and generally the cars that they end up on just happen to be owned by older people, and they just don't have any experience with it. So it'd be like if you told me to rebuild a computer and I don't have any experience doing that, and it's my first time doing it, I'm probably going to make some mistakes along the way. And that's what happens, what I see with the builds of the Sniper systems is, things don't always go 100% right. And the unfortunate reality is then usually 9 times out of 10, Holley gets blamed for it.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you my little story about the Holley Sniper 2. So we've been asked for Holley content for as long as I can remember, and I don't, would I say I've been resistant to it? Maybe I've just had too much other stuff going on, and we're like, yeah, we'll get to that. And for the last few years, we've had a 1966 Chev C10 truck that was just a cool truck that both my business partner and I liked. Sort of just about scrapes the ground. It's got a patina paint job, and it's a bit banged up, so you don't actually mind putting the dogs on the tray or using it to do a run to the rubbish dump or whatever. And it's just a stock, completely, as I'm aware, unmolested 350 small block Chev, and it came equipped with an Edelbrock carburetor. And I have never been a carb guy. Wouldn't know where to get started. I'd actually say this thing was pretty damn good. I couldn't really fault it. Cold start was probably about the only thing where it really suffered, and we get quite a big swing in temperature here in Queenstown. Other than that, it just drove great, and you put it on the dyno. I mean, it made no power, but you got an air-fuel ratio trace that was, you could run a ruler through it, which I'd really never seen from a carburetor. Anyway, we decided this was going to be the perfect vehicle to do the Holley Sniper 2 install on, and we did that. And I think Holley's claim to fame, exactly what you were saying there, is this product is designed around their older market where they haven't seen a laptop before. They're not going to go and buy a laptop. They probably wouldn't even know how to get it connected or the software downloaded. So you got that little touchscreen LCD thing, and yeah, I think I don't answer 5 questions: engine capacity, cam aggressiveness, I can't even remember now, and it'll self-tune. And I mean, I've heard these claims of self-tuning for as long as I've been a tuner, and normally it's a train wreck or a dumpster fire inside a train wreck. And I was obviously not really expecting miracles. it did what it said on the label. It actually was quite impressed with the results. Obviously, then I sort of went ahead and got the laptop software and did a tuning worked example on that. Obviously, a lot more control once you get sort of into the weeds with the laptop. But for a basic install on a stock small block, it just did a really stand-up job. And I was ready to pull this thing to pieces, and I just couldn't. Now, that might not be everyone's experience. I've got one data point here, but in my one data point, it was actually way better than I'd expected it to be.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And this is exactly how I say it, basically. It's like the more mild and tame or original or stockish, the better it's going to work. And the more you go the other direction with it, the worse and worse that it gets.
I could imagine if someone wanted to try and run, a Pro Charger on it with a big cam. I don't know, maybe it could still work. But again, it comes down to that's probably not the right tool for that particular job.
Yes, 100%. And I've seen cars that just audibly knock, you can hear it from 100 miles away, and you're like, oh, that's going to end really bad. let's not do that anymore. I've seen them work really well. I've tried to duplicate this and I can't do it, but I'm genuinely curious to know how it happens. But I've seen probably like 50 cars where the idle and the full throttle, like target air fuel ratios, are swapped. And the idle and full throttle timing values are swapped.
That would be somewhat scary.
Yeah, like you 14.7 target air fuel ratio at full throttle and 43 degrees of timing.
Yeah, not the winning mix.
Yeah, so like I'm genuinely curious how they're doing this. Like, are they inputting something wrong? Are they inputting stuff and then going back and trying to redo it, or are they inventing their own numbers? But I've seen it so many times that I don't think it's something that people are doing.
Yeah, no, that's it was probably a year or so ago that I did that worked example, so it's not fresh in my memory, but I think it sort of guides you with a target air fuel ratio that's going to be sensible for most applications. So
exactly why I'm so like perplexed as to how these numbers are getting there.
Yeah, interesting. One thing that I did find a little frustrating in the Holley software for the Sniper is the table resolution. It's just out the gate. Way too many breakpoints are just completely unnecessary. And that's one of the things I sort of teach when you're setting up a standalone, as most novice tuners will think that more is better. So they're going to max out at however many breakpoints we can have for RPM and load. That's what they're going to put in there. Not really understanding that the ECU is actually interpolating between points anyway. And you don't need that resolution to be that fine. I mean, I'm normally sort of 500 RPM. That's fine in most instances. Maybe I'll chuck a couple of extra zones around the idle and transition off idle. If you run the car and you find that you're getting a weird change in VE very quickly, then you could put another zone where you need it. But for the most part, 500 RPM will do it. Likewise, if we're talking KPA, I'm sort of 20 KPA in most places, and then a little bit of more resolution around the sort of the idle and cruise areas, just so I've got better control. And from memory, I could edit breakpoints, but I couldn't remove some. So it just ended up with way more than I actually needed. And the other frustration that you definitely not going to share is, from memory, could not change temperature units from Fahrenheit to degrees Celsius, which I thought was a little unusual, but really, really clearly shows me the market that this product is targeted to.
I was going to say that one's 100% the market that they are targeting. And the funny part is with the HP and the Dominator software, you can't choose how many breakpoints you get, but they have a small table and a large table. So the small table is, I forget, it's like roughly half the size, and can tune a 3,000 horsepower car, no problem with half the table size. So the huge table is definitely too much. It takes a really long time if you want to run through all of it, as to where if it was...
Yeah, you're just making more work for yourself.
Exactly. I always wondered if they do it that way because they're leaning so hard on the self-tuning.
Yeah, that might be the case. I mean, like I said, that example of the self-tuning for fueling was actually genuinely pretty impressive. But I do think when you've got a self-tuning ECU, any ECU, it's sort of a case of garbage in, garbage out. And in order to get the cells tuned properly, you want to make sure that you're as close to the center of the cell as possible. And so you're not interpolating. So I guess on that basis, yeah, if they've got 1 million cells, it's more likely to be closer to the center of one.
You're always in the middle of a cell because you get one every 6 RPM.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, you could be right. I mean, there's often sort of a reason behind the scenes that I'm not aware of just because I'm the end user of the product.
Yeah. So the Terminator X came out and it's in everything. Basically, especially if it has an LS in it, that's swapped. The Terminator X is the most popular thing. I definitely prefer the Terminator X over the Sniper. Basically, port injection versus throttle body injection.
It's a no-brainer.
Alone, just that would be enough. But the software, you can just do way more with it. The HP and Dominator are the higher levels. And I think if you were going to make a complaint, depending on which side of which product you owned, I almost feel like they made the Terminator X, I don't want to say too good, but too similar to the HP and Dominator, the higher end ECUs.
Yeah, okay.
It's like if you spend double on the nicer ECU and then you see that the lower end ECU on paper does almost all of the same stuff, you're like, well, why did I buy the more expensive one?
So where actually is the separation in capabilities between the Terminator X and the Dominator?
The primary one is the hardware is much like you pick up a Terminator X and it feels like a Fisher Price kids telephone, and then you pick up like a HP or Dominator, it feels like an iPhone. So they're aluminum case and they're potted. They can get wet. One of the most advantageous for the normal person is that you can Terminator X is NTK or Bosch O2 sensor only, and HP and Dominators you can use NTK. The Dominator has probably the most inputs and outputs of any ECU on the market without additional boxes and things like that. So that's the big difference.
I think that NTK versus LSU sensor issue, I just talked to that for a second, because back when I was tuning a lot of cars that were running heavily leaded fuels like Q16, C16, VP import, and my old Dynapack was running Motec PLM into it with the LSU. It wasn't the 4.9, must have been 4.2 back in those days, but same. And you could kill one of those sensors if you're unlucky in about 2 hours on those leaded fuels. I'd probably average maybe like 2 or 3 tuning sessions on those drag cars before I'd kill one. But yeah, that gets pretty tiresome pretty quickly. And we ended up moving to the NTK sensor, which at the time was, I think, more than double the money of the current LSU sensor. I'd get over a year out of that sensor on these heavily leaded fuels. So I think the use case for the NTK sensor is definitely if you're running a leaded fuel, you're going to get much more life out of it. Is that sort of the same experience you've seen?
100%. So I bought, when we had the Dyno Jet, same deal. I had the just Bosch sensor and we'd just tear through them. It started to feel like you were tuning cars for free because you're just buying O2 sensors left and right. Like that's not the way it works, but that's the way it feels. And I got tired of it and I tried a few different like just external meters and not a whole lot better. And this is before I had any difference. Like I didn't even know that the sensors were different. I was just like this brand wideband versus this wideband. This one works better. This one doesn't. But eventually I bought a Motec PLM and I think it was like $3,000 or $4,000, which was
those things weren't cheap.
It was $1 billion in comparison to and any of the other options. And I bought that with NTK sensor, and you'd start to feel bad. You'd be like, man, I think I've had this sensor in here for a year. Maybe I should just change it to make. And then you swap it out for another sensor, and it reads exactly the same. Yeah. And I don't think I still have that meter. I don't know if I've ever had a sensor go bad.
Yeah, just thinking about it, I think you might be right. I kind of was probably changing sensors out. It's like, this has been a while now, just like you. But yeah, I don't think I actually ever killed a sensor. But we digress. Okay, so you can choose sensors. The build quality is superior. It's watertight, weathertight. I guess you can run it in an engine bay. Is that the case then? If it can get splashed with water, I'm assuming you're not going to run it on a So ironically, I got a phone call from,
I forget what my caller ID said. It was almost like FBI. I thought I was going to jail.
Shit.
I was like legitimately nervous to answer the phone. And it was I forget which branch, but one of the branches of the police department in Washington, D.C. And they called and they were asking about tuning a boat with Holley on it. And I just figured it was one of the employees' like personal car and he just happened to use the work phone. But no, they had is an airboat that they use when the rivers freeze. And I guess this airboat can kind of like go on top of the frozen water or whatever, however that works.
Yeah. What are you talking, like hovercraft then? Is that what you're talking?
It's like, it was a boat, but I think it kind of worked like a hovercraft. Like I think if you needed to like with some speed and you needed to go over like a stretch of land, you could do it. Like it would just kind of hover on top of it or whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
But long story short, they just having nothing but problems with this boat that some place built and charged them all this money. And it had a Terminator X on it. And they mounted the Terminator X by the engine. And when the thing would like hop up and down and hit waves, like all of the water would spray directly onto the ECU. And eventually I got to the point where it wouldn't start anymore and everything's corroded and open the ECU up and it's just like demolished inside.
Yeah, hard to believe electronics and water don't go together.
Yeah. So you got two options: is we can relocate the ECU, which you're talking a whole new part, like you're rewiring the whole thing at that point, or we can try this, one of these other two ECUs that they claim are water resistant at the very least. And so that was my experience with a use case. And I've had some C10s come in with ECUs mounted under the hood. I don't know how wet they get, but they're surely near a bunch of heat.
Yeah, sure.
So in that case, I'd feel much more comfortable with one of the aluminum potted ECUs versus the plastic thing. That's probably just going to melt in 5 minutes.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Are we talking separation in functionality, though, between the Terminator X and the Dominator?
A little bit, but not as much as you would think. There are some different stuff, but especially to somebody that doesn't use it on a frequent basis, you would look and say that this has almost all of it. And then the other side is that the Terminator X keeps getting updates faster than the HP and the Dominator. I'm pretty sure it's because more people are using it.
Yeah, you're not really selling me on the extra functionality and cost here, if I'm honest.
That's sort of the problem. I mean, the Dominator for sure. If you need a bunch of inputs and outputs, it's a no-brainer. It's like it's the only option. The HP is kind of the bastard child a little bit because it only has 4 inputs, 4 outputs. But then the Terminator X has 4 inputs and 4 outputs. So unless you're running methanol or putting it on the back of a boat, there's not a whole lot of difference. There is some stuff. And like the HPs and Dominators used to have traction control where the Terminator X didn't, but now the Terminator X does. And like the HP won't do drive-by-wire or automatic transmission, but the Terminator X Max will, and the Dominator will. So it makes sense why the Terminator X is so expensive or so popular.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for my own personal selfish reasons here, I'm just going to get some information that I'm going to be applying to one of our own projects. We've got a C5 Corvette that we've been reflashing for some of our webinars using HP tuners, but that's going to be the platform for the Terminator X. And I'm just interested, how well does the 4L60, 4L80 transmission support work out in the Terminator X?
It works. It does what it needs to do, but if you're used to GM OEM software, you're going to probably wish you had more in terms of adjustability. I'd say it's like kind of bare minimum.
Right, so you're not going to be able to replicate sort of GM drivability with that control strategy?
Kind of, I guess, depends on use case and how specific you want to be. Like it is 100%. You can get them to drive very nice. You can get the converters to lock and unlock. You can, set your speeds and you can, shift speeds and change that off of either RPM. I'm sorry. Well, obviously RPM, but TPS or map. So you have what you need, but it's kind of almost like Holley's idle control. Mm-hmm. It has what you need to make it work, but when you compare it to like the factory stuff, you every now and then you'll find yourself in a situation of like, man, I wish I had this table that the OEM stuff had or whatever.
Yeah, okay. I find that every aftermarket standalone ECU system I tune, they'll have a handful of features that I absolutely love. Sometimes you'll be like, why isn't everyone else doing it exactly like this? And inevitably there'll also be a bunch of stuff where I'm scratching my head wondering how they got it so wrong. Could you give us your sort of take on the Holley from that perspective? And this isn't sort of dissing Holley. Like I say, this is for every brand.
It's well, I get asked a lot, what's the best ECU? And my reply is usually, if there isn't a best ECU, if there was a best ECU, there would only be one. But instead we have hundreds of them because they all just have their pros and cons. And the big one with Holley is that there's not going to be any CAN integration with any modern car. So depending on what you work on a 69 Camaro, you don't care, but you're not going to put Holley in a Lamborghini. It's just not going to work out like that. For me, one of my biggest pet peeves with any car is when they don't idle the way that you want, or you're concerned that it might shut off on you at a stoplight or something like that.
Nothing worse.
That's like my pet peeve. So me personally, I wish there was significantly more idle adjustability.
Okay.
But you start adding a whole bunch of more adjustability, and now it becomes that much more complex for the people that don't understand that. And so I get that.
It's always a tightrope that the manufacturers are walking with, trying to get a feature that does the job perfectly from an engineering standpoint versus something that the tuner can understand. And a little anecdote I'll chuck in here. I think they've since removed it, but back in the early days of Motec's M1, and they'd introduced a feature, hopefully I'm getting this right here, where you could define a coefficient of how much temperature was being transferred from the inlet manifold wall to the body of the inlet temp sensor. So basically, how much the heat soak in the inlet manifold was skewing the reading of the temp sensor. Now, I'm not arguing that happens. I'm sure it does. My argument to Motec is, how is the average tuner, or for that matter, even an exceptional tuner, what chance have they got of being able to correctly calibrate that parameter? There's no way.
Exactly zero. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the problem, that the knock-on from that is, the more functionality that you add in, the more room you give, basically the more rope you give a tuner to hang themselves with if they don't know what they're doing. You can get so far outside of the ballpark that you can't find your way back in. So I do get that. Sometimes less is more, but as you become a more competent tuner, that's when you start also wishing that you did have a little bit more.
And I've had this conversation basically with Holley numerous times, because they'll ask, like, what features would you like to see? And then you're always adding more when you're asked that question. No one's ever asked, like, what features do you want to see? And you're like, well, get rid of these tables. Like, it doesn't go that direction. So you're always like, well, what about adding this? What about adding this? And then the rebuttal is almost always like, well, if we do that, the core of our customer base is just going to get themselves into trouble with that.
Here's a good approach to that, though, I think, is just being able to open up those functions or feature set for advanced users. Like, literally have a mode for your idle. Basic, advanced. Basic's going to give you idle target and a base duty cycle, and maybe that's all. And then the advanced is going to give you your idle ups and control versus temperature and speed, or whatever you might want to add in there. And I think that's a pretty easy solution to integrate, because let's be honest, it's not going to be difficult to add the functionality. It can be done.
Yes, and they've actually hit me with that as well, because if you go into the idle section, there is an advanced tab which gets you into a lot more like PID stuff, but it's basically just raw PID settings, and there's just a lot of other stuff and a lot of other ways to attack it versus just throwing like a PID value at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other one that I think a lot of people really would like to see is the saving grace with Holley is it has, they call custom tables, where you can create a table to do whatever you want based off of whatever you want for the most part. Sometimes, depending on what you want to do, it can be a little clunky, or you have to think outside of the box, or like create a fake output to create this fake input to make this table active when you want it to be. So you have to think. So I think that there could be some use cases where simplifying that could be a little bit better. But like the custom tables give you the ability to do most of what you want. If it wasn't for that, I think a lot of people wouldn't be as into Holley as they are.
It kind of reminds me of the old Motec 100 series gold box when they went to their version 3 software, which is back in the day now. But that same sort of system, you could kind of, within reason, almost do whatever you wanted. And I think a lot of tuners, when they transitioned from the M800 at the end of that life cycle onto the M1 at the beginning of its life cycle, actually hated the M1 because at that point it was so locked down. And you'd sort of ring up Motec and go, oh, I just want to do the simple thing, so just tell me how to do it. And you can't. Build custom firmware. That was sort of the answer. Obviously that's a long time ago, and Motec have kind of integrated all this stuff now to the most point. You can do whatever you want, just like you used to be able to, only on a much more powerful system. All right, so the custom tables side of things, any other like real sort of knock it out of the ballpark home run wins that Holley have got on the Terminator and Dominator?
I think for the average person, it's very approachable. This one, I guess, is subjective, but I'd say it's very affordable, at least what I would consider to be. If you're getting an ECU, O2 sensor, built-in wideband, harness. The big one is the harness. I think...
Yeah, people hate wiring.
Even with Motec, if you look at the price of just a Motec ECU, obviously it's a little bit more expensive, but it's not astronomically more expensive. But by the time you factor in your spaceship, wiring harness, and nobody offers like a entry-level harness for any of the Motec stuff. So then you're paying your wiring guy, and you're bringing the car, and you're dropping it off. Outside of some, the plug and play options where the patch harnesses and whatnot, I think anybody can, it's like 4 wires or something to basically get your car up and running. I think the ability to use that little handheld and type in, answer 3 or 4 questions and get the car to start and run is incredible for most people. How many people have spent 5 years putting a car together and they start it up for the first time and it's pouring every fluid out of it?
Yeah.
And, if you waited until you got to the dyno shop to find that out, that could be devastating. So being able to get the car to start up and run, maybe driving onto a trailer, I think that's a huge selling feature. I think they were really smart on being able to integrate the harnesses. So you can just unplug a Terminator X and plug in a Dominator for the most part. And then you're right up into, their higher end thing with 4,000 inputs and outputs. So
if you need the I/O, it's an easy upgrade.
Exactly. And a lot of people just budget, so they'll get the Terminator X to get the car up and running, knowing that they need a Dominator, but you can sell a used Terminator X in 5 minutes. So they'll get up and running on the Terminator and then swap out later. With any system, there's some quirks, like they have a input-output expander module, which the concept is kind of cool, to just be able to plug in a separate box, and then now you have more inputs and outputs. But if there's any of the setup that is kind of integrated within the system, like pre-canned sensors and stuff, you can't wire those into the expander box. Those have to go directly into the ECU. And then for anything like a custom sensor setup, you could run all that into the CAN IO box.
Sure.
But what happens is that people don't know that. So then they'll wire everything up underneath the dash of the car, reinstall the dash, can't get to it now, and then come to find out that it's not going to work the way that it's wired. So that's kind of becomes problematic. I guess really the answer to that is more of a documentation problem, but the flip side is not very many people actually read the directions to stuff. They just start, plugging things in.
Of course they do. Yeah, it's human nature. Yeah, we only read the manual when we actually get stuck and find out.
Yeah, after you've already screwed it up and you want to figure out what you did wrong.
Yeah.
A lot of people are complaining that there's no 8 HP transmission support as of right now.
Yeah, well, that's interesting you raised that, because I am in the finishing stages of an 8 HP transmission tuning worked example for one of our courses using the Turbo Lamic controller. And obviously the 8 HP swaps are definitely nothing new. They've been doing them for years, and I kind of just ignored it. How excited can you get about swapping an automatic transmission into a car? And I just didn't get it. So I wasn't really following along. And one of my guys, Connor, who does our CAD stuff, his brother Tyler's got this old 1992 Volvo 240 SE station wagon that's just like a square brick, looks like a complete sleeper. And he's pretty handy with CAD, and he's designed his own inlet manifold and his own turbo manifold. The thing makes about 400 wheel now, but still stock wheels and tires. Like it's just a complete sleeper. And went and stuck the 8 HP into that, and it's been an eye opener as to how good that transmission is. And then thinking back, after I'd sort of learned a bit more about the 8 HP, and my wife's got a 2021 Porsche Cayenne GTS, so that's the same as the Audi RS6, RSQ8, SQ7, the 4-litre twin-turbo V8, and they just change the power level depending on the vehicle.
I have one of those too. The mine's a SQ7, I think it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, same motor.
So we tuned that, and it's sort of 700 wheel horsepower, which is the Lamborghini sort of Urus top spec. She's never late to drop the kids at school. But anyway, I digress. The reason I bring this up was not long after we got that, and I was driving it, and I'm like, this transmission is too good to be an auto. And particularly with the launch control, like it'd flare up to 4,000 RPM, and I'm sort of thinking to myself, how is this happening? And the shifts were so fast. And I actually remember at the time Googling, is this a PDK? And sure enough, no, it's an automatic. Anyway, that was a few years ago. And now with the 8 HP, I'm like, hold on. Google again. Sure enough, the Porsche Cayenne GTS runs the ZF 8 HP gearbox. So, we've completely derailed this, but 8 HP support, I think, is becoming more and more important. You're seeing more and more of the standalones also provide this off the shelf. The integration I've got is between a Haltech and the Turbo Lamic, and I think by the end of this year, don't quote me because it might be wrong information, Haltech are going to have full direct integration with the Turbo Lamic as well, just to make that really easy. Like you can do it, but it's a bit messy at this stage. So I think you're right. That would be something that 8 HP swap is only going to become more and more popular, I think.
Yeah, it's considering how much everybody's ranting and raving about it, and it's just like you, I knew it existed. I didn't really care. It didn't excite me. And then some sort of a conversation happened somewhere, and I was like, oh, well, let me look into this a little bit. And you hear people saying that they're doing nothing other than doing that transmission swap, and it's like completely waking the car up.
Yeah.
And it's just like feels the equivalent of adding a bunch of horsepower. But
well, I think the other thing is just the torque handling capability of it. Like they just are so strong. And I had Greg from Turbo Lamic USA on the podcast. I think one of their customers, I'll probably completely hash this story up, a drift car over in Europe, and it's making 1,000 wheel. I think the guy does like 8 events a year, and it had the 8 HP in it for 7 seasons of racing, and he finally broke something. I mean, if that's any conventional dog engagement gearbox, you've got that thing out multiple times per season.
Absolutely.
But anyway, again, we've completely derailed this. This is not an 8 HP advertisement. Let's move on, Joe. And I mean, one of the reasons we wanted to have you on the podcast is because you essentially do what we do. You're offering training with online courses on Tune the Trilogy, as you call it, with the Holley product. So I'm really interested in that transition between running a workshop and now an online training business. It feels very, very familiar to me.
Yeah. So I guess it's 2-part. The first was deciding to start a YouTube channel and ultimately learning how to turn a camera on and how do I make the file go into my computer, and what is Premiere Pro, and oh my God, this is intimidating. How do I use this? And I just kind of figured it out. And I think probably just like everybody else, my early videos were just absolute garbage, and you just progressively get better and better. And I kind of liked the process. It was fun. I had fun with it. I, enjoyed it. And most importantly, starting a YouTube channel was, from a business perspective, was probably the best decision I ever made when it comes to advertising.
What was the initial aim with the YouTube channel?
I have a bunch of like cool cars on the dyno. So people probably want to see this 2,000 horsepower Mustang shoot 6-foot flames out of the back of it or whatever. So it started off with like just the cars, like no talking, no me. I didn't want to be on camera. I had no interest in that. Sounded like the worst thing in the world. And eventually I had a friend of mine that was like, your videos are just boring. Like talk, explain what's going on. Like just make a real video. So I started doing that and just did that. And I just got busier and busier and busier. But the real thing, the turning point was, I think every single car that came to my dyno, just about anyways, almost everybody said the same thing of, I wish I knew how to do this. I wish I could do this to myself. Or you're so lucky that you get to do this every day. I wish I could do it. Or I can't even tell you how many people ask, like, hey, if I paid you extra, can you teach me how to tune the car while you're tuning my car? And I just got asked the same thing so many times. And now I know how to make videos and feel like I have a pretty good handle on the Holley stuff and a pretty good handle on tuning in general and a pretty good handle on operating. I've owned a Dynojet, a Mustang dyno, 2 dyno packs, a mainline Pro Hub. So I've had a handle on all of that. So I started just asking people, would you be interested in this? And it was, people couldn't say yes fast enough. So I made it. And what I expected to happen and what actually happened were so drastically different, like absolutely blown away by the support and how many people were interested. And I'm sure just like you all, the relationships that have started and came from it and the opportunities. And it's been awesome. I really enjoy it. And I severely underestimated how much work it is, not just building the initial product, but everything that comes after the fact.
Yeah.
Building the product realistically is the easy part. Everything else is the hard part. And I'm sure you know exactly where I'm coming from and the growing pains associated with that.
Yeah, we started, it was just myself and my business partner, and we'd come from the workshop background, and I just didn't want to have staff anymore. It was hard work with staff, particularly. I've told this story a few times on the podcast, so I won't rehash it too much. But basically, the margins were so slim, and it was just hard work. And so we did start HPA as just the two of us, and I think that probably the first 2 or 3 years that was how it was. And then we realised, like, we actually, if we want to expand this and do what it's capable of, it's going to require some support. But I mean, it's grown bigger than I could even imagine. And I think we've just taken on another videographer, which brings our total to, I think, either 19 or 20 staff. So it's a pretty big animal now. But it's like you say, it's not just the making of the videos that's the important part. I mean, we've got 2 full-time employees doing customer support. And I think that's a big thing that differentiates us as well, is just being able to make sure that we do keep, well, obviously can't keep everyone happy, but we try our absolute best to keep our customers supported and happy. And then there's forum support, etc. as well that goes along with that. I was wondering with your current, 2 questions actually on this. First of all, how long have you been offering the online training for now?
I think it's been about 2.5 years, approaching 3, somewhere around that.
Is it sort of getting to a point where the side hustle becomes the main hustle, and are you going to transition more into this? Is there still time to run a performance workshop?
Just like any side hustle, it starts where you're 90% workshop, 10% the other thing. Yeah. And at this point, I'd say it's flip-flopped. It's probably 90% the training stuff and 10% the actual dyno shop. A large element of that is the weather here. Gets really cold and gross in the winter, and I have so much to do that I can do from my office at home. So when it's cold and miserable out, I just prefer to stay inside. And now this year's been cold for May. We've had a pretty crappy May, but the weather is starting to break now. So as we go into the warmer months, I'll probably do more tuning at my actual shop. I've debated in different things, because obviously I still have a shop and I'm paying rent and the dyno and all of the expenses that come along with that. So for it to sit there and not be used is kind of doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I've had so many people ask about in-person trainings. I've considered doing that. And I don't think I want to go down this road, but I could easily bring someone in to do tuning and feed them more than enough work to make that be worthwhile. But like you just said, trying to manage people in a shop can be kind of rough. If it was just like mechanical work, it wouldn't worry me quite as much, but there's just so much that can go so wrong so quickly with a dyno shop that...
Yeah, you can sort of, if you genuinely make a tuning error and grenade an engine, that's going to be a very costly mistake compared to the meager amount that you would have made for the tune in the first place. So yeah, there's a lot of trust involved when it comes to allowing someone else to be punching those keys on the keyboard while the car's on the dyno. Interestingly, we actually started from the in-person training side of things, and my story's a little different to you. We started High Performance Academy because I just got sick and tired of seeing cars being brought to us where it had already been tuned somewhere else, and you'd take one look at the maps or drive the car around the block, and it was immediately obvious whoever had done that had no idea what they were doing. And, cars that drove horribly, pumping out black smoke at idle, fouling plugs, and of course, engines that have been destroyed by incompetent tuners. And that really frustrated me, even though, we were profiting out of it because they were bringing the cars to us then to be retuned. But the situation just didn't sit right with me. And I think that situation is simply because there is no formal qualification path out there to become a tuner. So we started doing in-person training courses, and we'd do them over a weekend at my shop. And I don't know, we might have got 25 to 30 people in. And the first day was sort of a classroom style presentation. And then we'd have a car on the dyno. And on the second day, we'd cycle people through the car. So they'd actually get to run a car on a dyno and make some tuning changes. And they loved it. The problem was that there's 4.5 million people in New Zealand, so I can't be running 2-3 courses a month. It's just you quickly run out of people. But at the same time, we had quite a large Facebook following because of our drag racing success, and we're having people overseas ask for the class notes, and we're like, well, the class notes aren't going to make any sense on their own. So that's when we decided, well, why don't we record this and we'll make it an online video, and kind of the rest is history. But it was sort of creating, I guess, the resource that I would have liked to have had access to when I was learning to tune.
Yeah, and I probably left a pretty important part of that out. Is I call it the Holley EFI scam. And it sounds bad. I've actually considered making a YouTube video with that title, but I don't want to make Holley mad, even though it has nothing to do with Holley, but it would be total...
That's very clickbaity.
Yeah, very clickbait title, but I can't tell you how many people's cars have come to me. Same deal. They don't run good. They don't start well. They shut off every traffic light, and then you pull the file out of it and you look at it, and it's just the Holley base map. Oof. With the learn feature, turned on, and the closed loop set to, plus minus 100%. And they're paying $1,000 for it. And you can get that for free if you just knew how to connect the laptop to it.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many times I've seen this, and just same as you. It feels wrong, and you're getting paid to correct it, but you already watched somebody, blow $1,000 or whatever they paid to get to this point. And I don't know, it just doesn't feel good.
Yeah, I think that the whole tuning industry, there's a lot of operators out there. I don't know if they are purposely deceitful or they kind of get in too far over the front of their skis and just kind of imposter syndrome. They have to make it up as they go along. I don't know what the situation is, but unfortunately, there's more operators out there that I'd consider incompetent than those who are actually turning out great work. The knock-on effect, though, is it gives our entire industry, a bad reputation. So, I'd have people literally unloading their cars off the dyno and their bottom lips dragging on the ground. They look like they've just lost their grandmother. What's wrong? And they're literally expecting before the car's even off the trailer that they're going to be taking it away with a broken engine. It's like, this is not something. There's a disconnect here. Something is definitely not right.
Yeah, I think having a dyno shop for as long as I've had them, and how many cars I've had on the dyno with me tuning or other people tuning, I would say that engine failures are just extremely rare.
Yeah.
And it should not be normal. It should not be considered normal unless you're racing Top Fuel or something. Like, it shouldn't be normal where you're expecting the engine to fail during a dyno session.
One of the common questions I get in our webinars is, how many engines do you have to break while you're learning to tune? And the answer is 0. Like, there's no reason, like you say, for a sort of run-of-the-mill engine that's standard or lightly modified. If you understand the principles of tuning and you're listening for knock, there is absolutely no reason why you should need to break an engine while you are learning how to tune. Now, I wouldn't also suggest jumping on the dyno for your very first time and tuning a 1500 horsepower turbocharged B series engine. Hey, the tuning envelope understandably is going to get pretty narrow when you're trying to punch 50, 60 psi of boost into something. But particularly if you're starting, like we were talking about, the AFC on a naturally aspirated engine, that sort of thing, you'd probably be hard pressed to break it if you tried. And then the other thing I wanted to clarify here, because engine failures occur that are completely unrelated to tuning. So, you might have a high mileage engine that the bearings are a bit beat up, and you've got the engine on the dyno, and obviously you're putting it under high stress and load, and you have a bearing failure. I mean, that is not necessarily something you can point the finger at the tuner. Unfortunately, these things do happen with engines that haven't been well maintained or are high mileage. And the other one I saw a lot, I imagine you probably as well, is turbocharged cars with head gasket failures. Now, that kind of a fuse really. It's going to be a limiting point with cylinder pressure, and it is going to cut your dyno session short. You're done for the day. And there's going to be some cost involved, but I mean, to me, that's not a blown up engine either. That's completely rectifiable. So, those people that are grenading stock Mitsubishi Evo engines on the dyno with a tune, it's because they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, that the first engine that I ever had fail on me on the dyno, I was like devastated. I was heartbroken. I thought I was a failure. I thought my career was over. Everybody in the world's going to hear about this. And the other thing is we were going to do a cam test for Skunk 2. So this particular car, and this is 100 years ago in the Honda Tech days. And so this car was going to have like press from Skunk 2. So this was going to be like very beneficial for my business. And this was when I was relatively like new to it. So I was excited about all that. Before we can even get the cams in, the engine fails on this car. I'm like, this is my cookie cutter setup. We built a turbo kit for it. The same turbo we always use. Like, why did this fail? So I didn't even give the customer the option. I'm taking this apart to try and see what happened. And this is when everyone was doing, wire tucks and trying to hide all the wiring to everything. And the very first thing that I did is start unplugging the injectors to start taking the head off. And the wires had pulled out of one of the injector plugs because there was so much tension on it.
Oh.
But it was in the connector enough where there was a couple of strands of wire touching it.
Yeah.
And sure enough, that's the cylinder that failed. So I'm sure the injector was working enough to not be all the way off, but on just enough where it was just dead lean and killed itself. And
yes, so again, not a tuning related failure in the end.
Yeah, so that's usually you can find what happened. The other one that's always really bothered me in this industry is how when something does fail, how definitive people are on blaming something when they clearly don't know that that's what happened. So this engine failed because of this. I'm like, well, how did you jump to that conclusion?
And in all honesty as well, sometimes it's difficult and sometimes it's completely impossible to definitively say what the cause is. I mean, you pull an engine apart that's launched itself at 8,000 or 9,000 RPM. I mean, I'm sorry, you've got to be sort of some forensic specialist to really be able to pinpoint. I mean, sometimes, yes, it's going to be clear. If the big end cap of the conrod is black and blue, it's probably done a bearing and, it's heat welded itself to the crankshaft. But, often it's just not clear cut as to exactly what's gone wrong.
Yep. Yeah, exactly like my point. I heard one guy's engine let go for the third or fourth time, and the engine builder said that the engine, it was definitive as could be, that the engine failed because his oil filter relocation kit was only good for 1,000 horsepower, but he was making 1,200 horsepower. I'm like,
Not a thing.
What?
Not a
Yeah,
thing. No, I've never seen an oil filter relocation kit rated by horsepower. That's an interesting claim. And there's always that. I think one of the downsides of being a tuner is you are the last person to touch a combination, and you don't know who built the engine. You don't know who's built the fuel system, who's pieced it all together, the oiling system. There's just like 1,001 ways that this could go bad. And of course, you're the last person to touch it, so the finger always gets pointed at the tuner. And that was one of the reasons why I started building my own engines as well, because that way I had complete control. I was building the engine, I was choosing the parts, I was tuning the things. So, if anything went bad, then okay, I'll take it on the chin. It's my fault. So it just gave me a bit more control over the situation.
That's basically how we did it too. It was, we had a machine shop we used. They do the machine work, put the motor together, build the turbo kit, put it on the dyno, tune it, rinse, repeat. And that was the bread and butter. I always say that the tuner is like the equivalent of a quarterback at the Super Bowl. If you win the game, the quarterback gets all the credit.
Yeah.
And when things go bad, the quarterback takes all the blame. I feel like that's exactly how the tuner aspect works.
That's actually a great analogy. Yeah, couldn't be more right there. All right, look, I think we'll move towards wrapping this thing up, Joe. We've got the same three questions we ask all of our guests at the end. And the first of those, what's next in the future for you?
Lately, I've actually been working with a bunch of tuners who are at the point where they're starting to make some money with it and trying to grow their businesses and get eyeballs on their businesses and all of the stuff that comes along with that. So that's been a little side project I've had going on, which we've had a lot of guys having a lot of success with that so far. So that's been pretty fun.
So sort of mentoring.
Yeah, I guess you could call it that. So that's been fun. I've between marketing and selling and promoting and learning about all of that stuff with, Tune the Trilogy and whatnot. It's one of those things where you realize that you can help people, and especially when there's like a money attached to the backside of it, like you can legitimately change people's lives if you teach somebody how to make money. So that's been pretty enjoyable. Like I said, the in-person stuff is something I get asked about what feels like 20 times a day. So that's not out of the question. And I'd like to expand.
You've definitely got at least a population base. Like I explained the limitation of in-person for me, and it didn't work for me, but that's a population-based limitation. Obviously, the US does not have that limitation, so it could be very, very effective. I have no doubt.
Yeah, and then again, the reality is you're going to pretty much exclusively be doing that on the weekends, I think, for the most part.
Yeah, so you get back to that same situation of weighing up family time versus business.
Exactly. But at the same time, if you do, pick your number, 6 a year or something like that, you can build some hype up around it and totally reasonable. But I don't know if you get the same thing. I get a lot of people that just say that they can't learn online, that they need to be hands-on and whatnot. So
yeah, I do. We constantly get asked for in-person training, but I mean we've just made a hard line that we can't do both, and this is the method that we've chosen. I'd say yes, we do get those same sort of people who are resistant saying they need to be hands-on. I think they're probably wrong, and I think probably if they actually just took a course and saw how detailed the courses are, and I mean the benefit for me, as I see it with online training, is that you can come back to the material and review it time and time and time again. I've been to in-person training course, and it's like trying to drink from a fire hose. And then at the end of it, I probably retained about 30% of that. Now, there is obviously a hands-on element with tuning. I'm not trying to say there isn't. So we're very open with our courses that once you've taken the course, you are still going to need to put in the time and actually refine those skills. You're not going to come out the end of a course as a top-notch professional tuner. It's still going to require time in the seat on the dyno to actually understand, I see how that now works, and refine that. It's the old 10,000 hours to become an expert at anything part, I think.
Yeah, and that's usually my rebuttal when people are telling me about that or requesting the in-person stuff. I'm like, if I give you this course for the next 5 years, you can go back and reference whatever you need. If I teach you in person, before you make it back home, you're going to forget a minimum of 50% of everything that we went over.
Yeah, no, I think so.
So I've even considered having it to be like having our existing training is like a prerequisite. So that way, when we do the in-person stuff, we don't have to cover
all of that basic ground. Yeah.
And then it could be more like hands-on on the dyno. And there's a million ways to do it. So it's just something that's not necessarily a top priority, but
it's on the radar.
Kind of thinking about. Yeah.
Is there any advice you give to a younger version of yourself to help reach where you are today in your career faster? Adopt the K-series?
So coming from both of us talking together, this might sound like a pitch for our stuff. But I would honestly say, I'll give a story that will sum this up and not make it sound like I'm trying to pitch our own stuff. I had a customer came into my shop and he had an automotive business, not performance. I don't remember exactly what he did, to be honest. Doesn't matter. But while we were tuning his car on the dyno, he took a phone call and he was like, that was my business coach, and kind of went on and on about whatever they were talking about. In my head, I'm like, what in the hell is a business coach? And why do you need a business coach? You sell something to people for money, and like that's how it works. And 10 years later is when I started paying for education outside of college. That was a total waste. But like I said, with Jeff Evans, I think it was the first time where I went and I paid him some money and he taught me some stuff. And I learned so much so quick that I'm like, there's something to this.
Yeah.
And then since then, if there's anything that I want to learn, I just pay for it. And it shortens the learning curve by so much that if I would have done that 10 or 15 years ago, like I could only imagine where I would be now compared to, where I currently am. So,
100%. I would have paid for what we sell if it was available back when I was trying to learn how to tune. Yeah, I was trying to figure it out on the fly. There weren't a lot of people locally tuning. There was no one I could lean on. It was basically a case of trying to figure it out for myself and trawling forums and then trying to sort fact from fiction. And yeah, so that, like I say, that's we created what I would have wanted. And yes, you're absolutely right. It will fast track anyone's sort of learning curve, and it's going to look cheap when you look back on it. Just a touch on that business coaching thing. Back through the old tuning shop, we actually used a business coach for about 2 years, and that in itself was invaluable as well. I mean, the usual entrepreneurial trap, which is exactly what I fell into, was I was good at tuning cars. So I started a business tuning cars, not realizing that I was going to be lucky to be able to spend half of my day doing the thing that I was good at. And I didn't have the first clue about profit and loss. I didn't have the first clue about marketing or quotations or dealing with suppliers. And, every small business essentially has the same problems. So these business coaches, they're not reinventing the wheel here. They're just listening to your story and providing you with the feedback of the solutions to your problems. And the other thing that was really great with the business coach was it was about accountability. So we'd have a meeting once a month. At the end of the meeting, like, okay, what are the 5 things that you're going to action before our next meeting? And you really wanted to make sure that you don't come back without having those things done. So that was, again, worth absolutely every cent we put into it. Right, last question for today. Joe, if people want to find you, follow you, take some of your courses, where should they go to? How are they best to find you?
It seems most people find me on YouTube, which my channel name is just my name, Joe Simpson. And Tempest Racing's website is actually tempest-racing.com. And if you're interested in learning how to tune Holley EFI, tunethetrilogy.com is that website. And I don't have anything public yet for the mentorship stuff. So if that's something that maybe interests you, just on one of those other platforms, send me a message or whatever, and we can discuss that. But I haven't quite launched that one out into the world yet. It's getting close. We have some people, like I say, running through it, but
sure,
trying to iron out the bugs before putting it out there.
No, sounds good. Well, as usual, we'll put links to those accounts in the show notes. Look, it's been great to chat, Joe. Great to get your backstory. It really does mirror a lot of my own story. So it's been really interesting. Thanks so much for your time today.
Yep, I appreciate it. Nice talking to you.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Tuned In, and don't forget, by using the code podcast500 at checkout, podcast listeners can get a huge $500 off our VIP package, which includes over 40 current courses, as well as a long list of courses to be released in the future. As a VIP, you'll also get lifetime access to our members-only webinars and our community forum. Lastly, we'd love it if you could leave a review or comment on your preferred podcast platform. Your feedback really helps us to reach a wider audience, which in turn allows us to continue bringing you more high-quality guests. As a thank you, each week we'll randomly select a review or comment from Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube and send the winner a free HPA t-shirt shipped anywhere in the world. It's also a great place to ask any questions you might have too, and if your review or comment is chosen, I'll do my best to answer them directly. So this week, a big shout out to John from Spotify, who has said, coming from originally being a diesel mechanic to opening my own performance shop building Supras, building my own time attack Supra, then closing that shop, now recently moved into vehicle wiring, mainly performance, and very recently have started to get into motorsport wiring. The HPA courses, YouTube videos, and podcasts have really been an awesome tool over the last few years. I've learned so much from HPA. Well, that is amazing to hear, John. Glad that our courses and our YouTube videos are helping you. And if you want to reach out with your t-shirt size and shipping details, we'll get a fresh tee shipped straight out to you. All right, that concludes our interview. And before we sign off, I just wanted to mention, for anyone who's been perhaps hiding under a rock and hasn't heard of High Performance Academy before, we are an online training school and we specialize in teaching a range of performance automotive topics, everything from engine tuning and engine building through to wiring, car suspension and wheel alignment, data analysis, and race driver education. Now remember, you've got that coupon code. You can use podcast75 at the checkout to get $75 off the purchase of your first course. You'll find our full course list at hpacademy.com/courses. Important to mention that when you purchase a course from us, that course is yours for life as well. It never expires. You can rewatch the course as many times as you like, whenever you like. The purchase of a course will also give you 3 months of access to our gold membership. That gives you access to our private members only forum, which is the perfect place to get answers to your specific questions. You'll also get access to our regular weekly members webinars, which is where we touch on a particular topic in the performance automotive realm. We dive into that topic for about an hour. If you can watch live, you can ask questions and get answers in real time. If the time zones don't work for you, that's fine too. You're going to get access as a gold member to our previous webinar archive. We've got close to 300 hours of existing content in that archive. It is an absolute goldmine. So remember that coupon code podcast75. Check out our course list at hpacademy.com/courses.